Hello and welcome back to the latest instalment of the Tyre Recycling podcast. If you're watching for the first time, remember to hit the subscribe button on YouTube, or if you're listening to us from wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, we've reached episode 19 now, and as ever, I'm joined by the editor of Tyre Recycling, Ewan Scott. Ewan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. Looking forward to this one. Kadar Murthy is he's a well-known figure in the tyre recycling sector, not because he recycles tyres, but because he's involved in, or he has been involved in selling the product of recycled tyres. So he has a good, strong market overview. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm not too familiar with Kadar Murthy, but you are much more familiar with the key personalities in the tyre recycling sector. For people like myself, could you give a lowdown on Kadar's background and what you'll be looking to talk about today?
Right, I think for the people in the tyre recycling sector, Kadar was closely associated with the commercialization of Lehigh's micronized rubber. He was with the company before and after it was taken over by Michelin. He is a proponent of the use of recyclates, and he was very positive about the use of micronized rubber in the tyre industry, in the rubber industry. He moved on a couple of years back to Boston Materials. Now, Boston Materials are not involved in the tyre recycling sector, but they are still involved in recycling. They recycle carbon fibre, or rather they use recycled carbon fibre to make new products. So Kadar Murthy understands the recycling sector. He understands the markets, and what we're looking for from Kadar is an overview of the good and possibly bad points of the recycling sector, in particular the pyrolysis sector, and where he sees people making the right moves and possibly where they're making the wrong moves.
Okay, well, I'm eager to see how this interview turns out. So without any more waiting around, let's get stuck into that interview right now.
I'm looking for information on pyrolysis, and you offered to speak to us. You're now with Boston Materials as the commercial manager?
Yeah, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Boston Materials.
Okay.
And we're in the we've developed a new novel three-dimensional carbon fiber material, which is made through a coating process with milled carbon fiber to improve strength and reduce delamination, improve toughness, and things like through thermal conductivity in composite products, such as sporting goods and EV vehicle battery packs, and anything that requires increased strength or impact.
Okay.
And we're based in Boston, and we're venture funded.
Right. So you're a consumer of recovered carbon black?
No. We are actually we use recycled milled carbon fiber, which is actually made by the same process that recovered carbon black is made by the pyrolysis process. So you take a carbon fiber structure that's already been made. So as an example, you could take a panel, a carbon fiber panel, and you pyrolyze it, and you recover basically carbon fiber, which you mill, and you make milled carbon fiber. That's what we call recycled milled carbon fiber. And it's the same process that they make recovered carbon black by.
Okay, so you are still involved with recycling through the
in a different way, And very similar to Lehigh, we're not back integrated. We don't do the recycling step itself, but we use recycled material. So if you think about it, 50% of our product is recycled, made from post-industrial aerospace carbon fiber, and that's what gives us the ability to sell something at a lower cost than traditional carbon fiber fabrics. And with the proprietary technology we have and aligning the milled carbon fiber in the Z-axis, that's really what we are doing today.
Okay, so what is your view on the pyrolysis sector at the moment? Is it something that we're going to see a lot more
of? So if you think about the parallels of both industries, the tire industry has been at pyrolysis for quite a while now, and the carbon fiber industry has only recently started down the path of thinking about recycling carbon fiber through the same type of process. But in the tire industry, they've been at it for a while, as I mentioned, and it is starting to take off. You see several announcements by pyrolysis companies. Some of them have done tie-ups with tire companies, and I think tire companies now have realized that they need multiple solutions to get to their goal of producing either an 80% or 100% sustainable or recycled type of tire by 2050.
Okay, and I'm looking at pyrolysis just now, and one of the problems that I'm seeing is that the market is absolutely awash with companies professing to be doing pyrolysis, but when you scratch the surface, they're actually not. They're trying to raise capital. In the UK, I think I've got about 40 companies alone that are trying to raise capital to establish tire pyrolysis plants, and at the moment we have one operational plant. Is that something that hinders the industry? Everybody chasing the same goal?
I think so. I think that it's pretty. How do I preface this? It's kind of like very parallel to what Lehigh was doing. There were several people that were trying to make rubber powder and getting back into tires. It was only after Lehigh got into the business and realized that you needed to think like the tire and the rubber company, and you needed to staff the company with people that understood the industry, understood how to know what the tire company's requirements were, how to be able to work with a large multinational. And I think that's starting to take place now in the pyrolysis industry. Unfortunately, we hit a little bump here in 2020 with COVID because you see companies like Pyrolysis who were making a pretty good play of it with their some of the tie-ups that they had with Continental and with some of the plastics companies. Unfortunately, they just hit. I think what a lot of these companies run into is not having the financing to really carry out what they're trying to do, because these things are very long term. I mean, the customer thinks 10 years out, and that's very difficult to fund when you're an investor. But companies like Boulder have taken a different approach. Their approach really is to look at non-tire applications and to think a little bit out of the box by building partnerships and relationships with people in the supply chain, like what they did with Continental Carbon in the carbon black industry. And I think their original focus was non-tire because they realized it was just going to take such a long time. And it's very difficult to put in the capacity because you have to raise the capital, and no one will give you that money to build capacity when you don't have any commitments. So it's a tough thing, and I think now some of the tire companies like Michelin have realized that if they get closer to some of these companies like Enviro, they can have an inside view as to how to really adopt this technology faster, right? So a couple of things. One is not enough capital. Two is, because people aren't going to take the risk. The second thing is the timeline is very long. And the third thing is that old, motto of how much capacity do you have? Well, I only have 1,000 tons. Well, we buy 10,000. So we're not even going to start down the process. So those are the kind of things that hinders the industry. But I think things are changing, and natural rubber prices are going up, and several of the tire companies now have put stakes in the ground as to being either 80 or 100% sustainable by 2050. Continental being the most recent one. So it's slow, right? I mean, it took Lehigh 10 years to get from start to finally some type of an event and selling the company. And so it's just a long haul, and it's very difficult because you need to have the capital to be able to do that. And most investors don't have that type of appetite. Their appetite is 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's very true. I think it's interesting that what you guys did at Lehigh was groundbreaking in many ways, but not least of all was in making that breakthrough with Michelin. It almost opened the door to the tire manufacturers accepting recycled materials and being public about, at least within the industry, being public about using recycled materials. Only 2 years ago, I've lost track of time this year. 2 years ago at the Future Tire conference in Cologne, there was quite some confusion from tire manufacturers about what exactly they were doing in terms of recycling and sustainability. To them, sustainability was making sure that they were getting ongoing supplies of rubber from rubber plantations and expanding rubber plantations, and that was their main focus. When questions were asked about recycling and including recyclates in new tires, which would have helped the sustainability project, most of the tire manufacturers, Bridgestone, struggled a little bit. Pirelli just stumbled, they didn't have any answers. Continental, of the three manufacturers that were present, were the only ones that had any real answers about recycling. But now Michelin has sort of shot ahead of the game with its involvement with Enviro, with Black Cycle, and with Pyrowave, looking at different options, and of course its takeover of Lehigh. So the game has changed dramatically in the last 2-3 years.
And I think one of the biggest challenges, and we saw this at Lehigh, is that when raw material prices, especially natural rubber, are high, there seems to be a greater interest in these types of opportunities. And then when prices go low, like they did last year, they start to these projects go on the back burner. But I think some of the more progressive tire companies realize that this is a long haul story, that they need to continue to work on it, because there will be a time where they need to adopt these technologies, and I think companies like Michelin and Continental will be ready at that point in time. So I think it's a challenge for the industry, and the technology is there, in terms of what we did at Lehigh, micronized rubber powder, recycled carbon black, devulcanized products. All these technologies exist today, because I think the challenge comes, most of these companies are very small, right? So it's very easy for a tire company to buy from another multinational, because they're backed by capital investment and technology, and they have a lot of people. It's very difficult to go work with a very small company, right? And so I think that continues to be the challenge. And I think the other issue in the industry is that, and we found this in the rubber recycling industry, is that there have been a lot of tall claims that have been made over the years, right, that have never come to fruition, right? People have made the claim that you can use 40% of our product in a tire. The challenge was that you need to start small and take small steps. Why not say, try our technology, you can use 5%, we can show you how to do that, and once they get comfortable with it, then you can move forward. But I think people try to jump to the end game in making very tall claims, and I think that industry in total is really riddled with that. And if I look at the carbon fiber industry today, which is just getting started on looking at recycling, these claims actually are not being made. They're taking very, very small steps to say, let's recycle carbon fiber. Let's put it in some very low end applications. Let's get some acceptance. People aren't making the claim to put this material in very high, loading levels in different applications. Maybe not yet. Maybe that'll happen, but it's starting off very slow because the largest user of carbon fiber today is the aerospace industry. So the only thing that matters in that industry is safety, right? And so that's why they're being very cautious as to making any types of claims. And most of these companies have actually been started by people that have been from the industry. So they really have a lot of industry background.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's been a number of companies that appear to want to run before they walk in marketing terms. And it's a bit of a, to mix my metaphors, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg argument. If the big market is the tire industry, the rubber industry, and they need high volumes, then if you're going to get involved in that business, there is that temptation to go big. And in the UK, we've seen quite a few projects talking about 50,000 tonnes, even 100,000 tonnes a year. And in terms of the end goal of delivering to the tire industry, yes, it makes sense. But to go from 0 to 50,000 tonnes, 100,000 tonnes in the space of a couple of years just is not going to happen. You can't. You have to start small. You have to say, as you say, you have to go in little by little and bring the industry on board, prove the product, and then build as you go along. So
that's right. That's exactly right. You need to spend a lot of time listening to your customers and understanding what the gaps are in terms of what their needs are, and then provide them with some type of data to show them that your product has some efficacy in what they're trying to do. Similar to the way that Lehigh did, we had a model tire formulation, which was a control formulation. We put in micronized rubber powder at different levels, and then we developed a solution to help improve the properties. But that took a while. It didn't happen in the first couple of years. And so once we started to do that, we started to generate traction. And I think that's what really a lot of the companies are missing. And I'm just surprised at the number of pyrolysis companies there are around the world, and how people think that carbon black is carbon black. But if you look at a tire, there's probably 7 to 8 different types of carbon black that are used in that tire itself, and they provide different types of properties. So it's really having a deep understanding, and this goes to any industry, having a really deep understanding of your customers and how you can provide them with a solution to a problem that they might have. And we'll call the problem here, how do I get to 80% recycled material or sustainable material by 2050? The answer to that question is, you've just got to be aware, as any one of these companies, that you're just going to be one part of a total solution. So how do you really fit in to that solution? That's really the key that I would say that we thought about at Lehigh, because we knew that there were other products such as devulcanized products and recycle that were being used, and we were just part of the solution.
Okay, so and you see parallels in the way the industry is developing with the carbon fiber sector?
Yeah, I would say so. If you roll back the clock maybe 20 years, this is where the carbon fiber industry is today, because the carbon fiber industry never really needed to recycle material because it's a high high price industry. But I think people started to realize that throughout the value chain, there's a 30% scrap rate from production of carbon fiber, which is highly energy intensive, to making parts, to disposal of carbon fiber itself. And so several companies, I think there's probably about 10 companies of varying sizes that have popped up all over the world that are looking at how to take carbon fiber, either use some type of chemical process or pyrolysis, and people seem to be settling on pyrolysis and generate scrap carbon fiber. The challenge is when carbon fiber is made, it's made in long strands or threads. And when it's used, it's chopped, and when it's pyrolyzed, it becomes even smaller. So it's impossible to get it back into its original shape. So people are looking for new applications for this type of technology. And this is where Boston Materials comes in. We're able to take scrap carbon fiber that's 150 microns and align it in a specific axis and to generate a new product out of existing materials. So there are some parallels. And I think, again, in the carbon fiber industry, people are very focused on safety in the aerospace industry. So getting back into the aerospace industry, it will happen at some point, but it's just going to take time.
Time's is a big issue, especially if you've got investors looking for a return on their investment.
That's right, and I think the same in the tire industry, that it requires a big investment and it requires a lot of patience.
Yeah. Okay. I think this has been very interesting, having a discussion with you and looking at things from a slightly different viewpoint. So thank you very much for your time, Kadar.
There you go, our interview with Kadar Murthy, the CCO of Boston Materials. Ewan, Kadar is obviously a long-term player in the sales of recycled materials, and that was certainly an interesting observation on pyrolysis and recycling in general. A big takeaway for me was how, sometimes a lack of adequate financing, even with strong contractual agreements, can prove to be a huge obstacle in the business. Would that be a fair assessment for you?
I think that's absolutely a fair assessment. In business, it's always the case that having adequate finance makes a huge difference between the chances of success and failure. But when you're talking about the millions of dollars or euros or pounds, whatever currency you use, that are required to establish a large-scale pyrolysis project or recycling project, then finance is critical. We have to remember that investment in a pyrolysis plant or a recycling plant can be anything, upwards of $750,000/pounds. I wouldn't like to put figures on it, but if you want to, you can go out and you can buy cheap equipment and you can make some sort of job of it. But what you get at the end of it is not going to be of the quality that the market needs. And it's not going to be of the volume that the market needs. And we see that time and time again. It's the critical point in selling to the rubber industry in particular is having specification and volume. And you cannot do that on a budget. It's difficult to get across to people just how much pyrolysis black or carbon black the industry uses. It's just a huge volume, and a small tire plant will use more carbon black in a month than the industry produces, the recycling industry produces in a year. So there's vast capacity there, but in order to, or vast potential there, but in order to meet it, you have to invest heavily. If you don't have the investment, it isn't going to work. And we can see that in the collapse of Pyrolysis. There was a company that had a strong offtake agreement with the tire manufacturer, Continental, and despite that strong offtake contract, it just did not have the funds available to pay its contractor to build the plant. And as a result of that and some other technical issues, it just didn't make the grade.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose with, you know, I always feel that when we talk about tire pyrolysis is that I think a lot of companies are getting to the stage of making it work from a business perspective as well. We're seeing more, you know, we talk to quite a few people from the pyrolysis sector on this podcast, and it feels though we're starting to see more positive stories rather than negative ones. Especially not just from a quality perspective, but from a business perspective as well. So it sort of feels as though that people are starting to get to the point of understanding how to make this work, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem that the pyrolysis sector has got now is there's a bit of a gold rush going on, and people desperate to get in there. I've been doing a survey of just the UK producers or the UK pyrolysis projects, and a search of Companies House reveals not just half a dozen, but tens of dozens of companies that are dabbling in pyrolysis projects. And when you dig deep, you don't need to dig deep, you scratch the surface just a little bit, and you find that many of these projects just have absolutely no finance at all. They're fishing for venture capital, and most of them just will not make the grade. So when we see the likes of Boulder Industries, Pyre, New Energy, Pyro One, Black Bear Carbon, and Viral, when we see these companies coming through with positive results and gaining market share, that's the good news we want to spread. We spent far too long looking at the, for want of a better description, the wannabes, who just are the also rans, who are just not going to make it. We need to focus on the good guys and the people who are making things work.
Definitely, but we've got a lot of good case studies for that now, not just from people we've interviewed in this podcast, but other people we've interviewed for the magazine. And obviously, as we've touched on before, that you'll be looking to interview more people from this for an upcoming pyrolysis documentary. Absolutely.
We've got a couple of people lined up, and the next issue of the magazine will have an overview of the industry. It's based on a couple of discussions I had with people I had hoped to have podcasts with, but they decided they would rather remain anonymous than stick their heads above the parapet, as it were. But the overview based on these conversations paints a slightly different picture of the pyrolysis sector, and I think it will be worthwhile reading. If you're looking for statistics and facts and figures, it's not for you. But if you want an overview of what people in the industry actually think, then it might be worthwhile reading.
Definitely, that's very true. Anyway, thank you for your time today, Ewan, and thank you to Kadar Murthy for joining us on the Tyre Recycling podcast. It was a pleasure to hear from him, and we hope to hear from him again soon. In the meantime, thank you for listening, and we look forward to welcoming everyone back to the Tyre Recycling podcast very soon. Until then, stay safe.